There is something about giving a gift that large, something that feels almost sacred, not because of the price, but because of what it represents. The morning I decided to give my son a $300,000 car, I woke up before sunrise. I didn't need an alarm. Mothers rarely do when something important sits heavy on their chest. I stood by the window of my bedroom, looking at the city skyline I'd worked 32 years to build my place in. People think wealth changes you. It doesn't. It simply exposes who you already were. I didn't grow up with anything. I built my company from a one-room office with second-hand furniture and a borrowed phone line. When my husband passed away, my son was 12. Grief and responsibility arrived together. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Everything I did after that, every contract, every late-night negotiation, every exhausted flight had one quiet purpose, so he would never feel small. Daniel was 26 when I handed him those keys. 26. Smart, educated, polished, raised in good schools, surrounded by opportunities I never even knew existed at his age. But somewhere along the way, I began noticing something subtle in him. Not cruelty, not yet, just impatience. With ordinary things, with people who move too slowly, with stories about the old days. Still, he was my son. And love, when you're a mother, doesn't calculate risk the way business does. The car was a limited edition Italian model, deep graphite grey, handcrafted interior, engine tuned like a symphony. I had paid in full, no financing, no conditions attached, at least not officially. The unveiling was planned for his birthday party. He insisted on hosting it at an upscale rooftop lounge downtown. Influencers, investors, kids, his friends from business school, champagne towers, a live DJ. It wasn't my style, but it was his world now. When I arrived that evening, I noticed how seamlessly he moved through the crowd, confident, charming, impeccably dressed. He had his father's smile, my composure. He kissed my cheek lightly. "Mom, you made it." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, and I meant that. An hour into the party, the valet pulled up the car in front of the entrance below. The staff had coordinated it perfectly. The headlights cut through the city dusk like something out of a film. I took the small velvet box from my purse inside the custom key fob engraved with his initials. When I stepped onto the small stage area and tapped the microphone, the music softened. "I won't speak long," I said. My voice was steady. Years of boardrooms trained me well. "I just want to say how proud I am of the man you're becoming." He smiled at that. I continued. "Daniel, you've worked hard. You've grown. And today I wanted to give you something to remind you that no matter how high you climb, you'll always have a foundation." There was polite applause. I handed him the box. He opened it. For a second, just one, I saw genuine shock in his eyes, then excitement. He walked to the edge of the rooftop and looked down, and when he saw the car, the crowd gasped. Phones came out immediately, cameras flashing, cheers erupting. He laughed, but not the way I expected. He leaned into the microphone. "Wow," he said loudly. "Well, I guess now people will finally stop asking if my success is self-made or inherited." The crowd laughed. Something in my chest shifted. It was a small sentence, but tone matters. He wasn't done. "Let's be honest," he continued, raising the keys slightly. "When your mum builds an empire, you might as well enjoy the perks, right?" More laughter, a few whistles. Someone shouted, "Must be nice." He grinned. "Oh, it is." He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at them. And in that moment, I understood something with painful clarity. I had given him everything except perspective. The music started again. The party swelled. He ran downstairs with his friends to take pictures with the car. Champagne sprayed against the night air. I stood alone near the edge of the rooftop, invisible for the first time in years. It wasn't the joke, it was the pride behind it, the casual dismissal of effort, the public framing of my life's work as a backdrop for his image. He hadn't meant to wound me. That was the most unsettling part. He simply didn't see it. And that's when I realised the lesson he needed was not about money. It was about value. And I would teach it, not through anger, not through humiliation, but through something far more powerful, time. I did not leave the party early. That would have been dramatic, noticeable, emotional, and I have never allowed my emotions to perform in public. Instead, I stayed. I stood near the glass railing with a flute of champagne I never drank, watching my son below through the wide rooftop windows as he posed beside the car, my car technically, surrounded by young men in tailored jackets and women balancing designer handbags on their wrists like status symbols. They took turns sitting in the driver's seat. Someone filmed him revving the engine. Someone else shouted, "Now that's generational wealth done right," and Daniel laughed again. There is a particular kind of laughter that comes from gratitude. This was not that. This was performance, a curated moment, a brand statement. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that he was young, that humour in front of friends is rarely thoughtful, that success at 26 can distort perspective. But then I heard something else. One of his friends, tall, sharp-featured, the type who introduces himself by mentioning his father's hedge fund, clapped Daniel on the back. "Man, you really hit the jackpot with your mum," he said loudly. "Some of us actually had to grind for ours." It was said jokingly, but it carried weight. Daniel smirked. "Oh, trust me," he replied. "I plan to. But if life gives you advantages, you'd be stupid not to use them." The word advantages lingered. Not sacrifices, not foundations, advantages. I felt my throat tighten. I remembered the nights I fell asleep at my desk when he was a teenager because I couldn't afford to slow down after his father died. I remembered missing school plays, parent-teacher meetings, weekends. I remembered promising myself that one day, when everything stabilised, I would make it up to him. And somewhere along that road, I confused compensation with love. When Daniel finally came back upstairs, flushed from attention, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You didn't have to go that big, Mum," he said, grinning. "I wanted to," I replied. He nodded absently, already scanning the room to see who was watching us. "You know," he added casually, "this kind of gift sets expectations." I looked at him carefully. "What kind of expectations?" He shrugged. "That I'm operating at a certain level now." I waited. People take you more seriously when they see what you're driving. There it was. Not joy, not gratitude, strategy. The car wasn't transportation. It was leverage. "And what level is that?" I asked gently. He smiled as if the answer were obvious. "Your level." I held his gaze. "And do you believe you've earned it?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned in closer, lowering his voice just enough to feel intimate. "Mom, let's not pretend everything I have isn't connected to you. That's just how legacy works." Legacy. Such a beautiful word, so easily misused. Before I could respond, Someone called his name again, pulling him back into the crowd. I watched him disappear, and in that moment, I realised something that unsettled me more than the joke, more than the public comments, more than the laughter. He believed it. He genuinely believed access equaled achievement, and that was my failure. The drive home was silent. The city lights blurred past my window as I replayed the evening again and again, searching for the exact point where pride turned into discomfort. It wasn't when he joked, it wasn't when his friends laughed. It was when he looked at that car and saw entitlement instead of responsibility. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark garage for several minutes before turning off the engine. There is a strange loneliness that comes with being successful. People assume power eliminates vulnerability. It doesn't. It simply isolates it. Inside the house, I removed my heels, set my purse down, and walked into my study. On the wall opposite my desk hung a photograph of Daniel at 12 years old, taken the year after his father passed. He was smaller then, quieter. He used to sit beside me in that very room, doing homework while I worked late. Back then, he would ask questions about contracts and clients, wide-eyed and curious. "Will I run the company one day?" he once asked. "If you earn it," I had said gently. He had nodded solemnly. Somewhere between that boy and the man celebrating on a rooftop tonight, something shifted, and I needed to understand where. The next morning, the video was already online. Clips of the reveal, his speech, the laughter. The caption read, "Mum just dropped $300,000 on my birthday. Hard work pays off. Hard work." The comments flooded in. Fire emojis, applause, envy, admiration. No one saw what I saw. No one heard what I heard. By noon, 3 board members had texted me light-hearted congratulations. One even joked, "Adopt me?" I responded politely. But internally, something had settled into place. I had built my life on discipline, on delayed gratification, on understanding that respect cannot be purchased, only demonstrated. And my son, standing in a tailored suit beside a car he did not pay for, had just announced to the world that success was inherited. That narrative would not follow my company, and it would not define my legacy. That afternoon, I called my CFO, not to complain, not to react, but to ask a simple question. How much of Daniel's current ventures are independently profitable? There was a pause on the line. "Do you want the honest answer?" he asked carefully. "Yes." Another pause. "None." I thanked him and ended the call. I did not feel anger. I felt clarity. The car was not the mistake. The applause was not the problem. The problem was that I had shielded him from the natural consequences of ambition without effort, and that ends now, not abruptly, not cruelly, but decisively, because a mother who truly loves her son does not protect him from reality. She prepares him for it, and what I planned next would not embarrass him in front of a crowd. It would confront him in private, where transformation actually begins. There is something profoundly unsettling about being disrespected by your own child, not because of anger, not even because of rebellion, but because of indifference. Anger, at least, implies emotion. Indifference implies replacement. For weeks after the dinner, my son did not call, not once. The car, that gleaming, unnecessary monument to my misplaced generosity, began appearing online in photographs, parties, rooftop lounges, night drives with music loud enough to rattle windows in neighbourhoods I once quietly donated to. People tagged him. People admired him. People commented things like, "You made it." I watched quietly. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even disappointment anymore. It was clarity beginning to form. I had spent years building something from nothing. I grew up sharing a bedroom with two brothers, patching the soles of my shoes with glue because buying new ones meant not paying the electricity bill. Every opportunity I had, I carved out with long hours and stubborn dignity. When I gave my son that car, I thought I was giving him a head start. I didn't realise I might have been giving him the illusion that he had already finished the race. One morning, about a month after the dinner, I received a call, not from him but from the dealership. There had been an incident. Nothing catastrophic, no one injured, but the car had been driven recklessly. Speeding, public complaints, a formal warning. The dealership knew me well. They spoke carefully, respectfully. They asked whether everything was all right. I thanked them, hung up. Then I sat in my office for a very long time, not angry, just thinking. A father's instinct is to protect, but protection without responsibility becomes poison. That evening, I drove to my son's apartment unannounced. He opened the door wearing confidence like armour. "Dad," he said, surprised but not exactly pleased. "What's up?" "May I come in?" I asked. He shrugged. "Sure." The apartment was impressive, far more expensive than a 24-year-old's first place should be. I recognised the furniture brands, recognised the designer lighting fixtures, recognised the lifestyle, but something else caught my attention. Silence, no books, no work desk, no evidence of effort, just comfort. We sat across from each other. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't mention the dinner. I didn't mention the incident. I asked him a simple question. "Tell me what you're building." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "In 5 years, what will exist because of you?" He laughed lightly. "Dad, relax. I'm figuring things out." "At whose expense?" That made him stiffen. "Why are you suddenly acting like I owe you something?" I studied his face carefully. This wasn't cruelty. It was entitlement born from insulation. "You don't owe me obedience," I said quietly, "but you do owe yourself effort." He stood up then, pacing. "Look, if this is about the car, I already said thanks. I appreciate it, but you can't use it to control me." Control, that word again. "I have never tried to control you," I replied, "but I will not finance disrespect." The room went still. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," I said calmly, "the car will be returned." He stared at me as if I had just insulted his identity. "You're joking." "I am not." "It was a gift." "It was," I agreed, "and I made a mistake." Silence thickened between us. "You can't just take it back." "Yes," I said evenly, "I can." His voice sharpened. "This is humiliating." I held his gaze. "You humiliated me first." He flinched, not from the volume, I hadn't raised it, but from the fact that I finally said it. I stood. "You may keep your apartment," I continued. "You may keep your freedom, but you will not build your confidence on money you did not respect." He was breathing harder now. "You're punishing me." "No," I said, "I am correcting myself. There's a difference." The next morning, I contacted the dealership. Paperwork was simple. Ownership is not as emotional as people think. Within days, the car was gone. He did not call. He did not text. Weeks passed, then months. Friends began asking quiet questions. "Everything all right between you two?" I would answer, "We are learning." Because that is what it was, a painful education for both of us, But here is the part I did not expect. 3 months after the car was returned, I received an email. Not a message, not a complaint, an email, subject line, job application. Attached was a resume, my son's. He had applied formally to a junior position in one of my smallest subsidiaries, entry level, nothing glamorous, no request for favouritism, no assumption of entitlement, just a resume. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. For the first time since that dinner, I felt something other than disappointment. I felt hope, but I also knew something else. This was not the end of the lesson, because growth is not proven by application. It is proven by endurance. And I had one final decision to make, one that would either rebuild our relationship or redefine it permanently. I did not respond to his email for 2 days, not because I wanted to punish him, because I wanted to remove emotion from the decision. When you mix fatherhood with leadership, judgment blurs, and I had already blurred too many lines. On the third morning, I asked HR to schedule an interview, formal, structured, with 2 department managers who did not know he was my son. I did not want mercy involved. When he arrived at the office, I watched him through the glass wall of the conference room. He was dressed well, not extravagantly, but properly. Navy suit, modest watch, no performance. He looked smaller, not physically, but stripped of armour. He didn't see me. I didn't greet him. The interview lasted 47 minutes. I read the transcript afterward. He did not mention me once. When asked about leadership experience, he did not exaggerate. When asked about weaknesses, he said something that surprised me. I used to think opportunity meant I was already capable. I'm learning that opportunity just means I have a chance to prove it. I closed the folder slowly. He was offered a position, but not the one he applied for. He requested a junior strategy analyst role, something clean, corporate, impressive. Instead, I reassigned him to operations, warehouse logistics, 6:30 a.m. shifts, inventory audits, vendor calls, real consequences. When HR called him with the offer, they explained the role carefully. There was a long pause. He accepted. No negotiation. The first week I said nothing to him. I did not visit the warehouse. I did not ask managers for updates. I let him exist in a space where my name carried no advantage. 2 weeks later, I received the first report. He was punctual, too quiet, some noted, but attentive. Made errors, corrected them, stayed late once to reconcile shipment discrepancies he didn't cause. I said nothing. At the end of the first month, I visited, unannounced. He was wearing a company polo shirt, sleeves slightly rolled, clipboard in hand. He looked tired, but focused. When he saw me walking across the concrete floor, something flickered across his face. Not defiance, not pride, uncertainty. I approached him calmly. "How's the work?" I asked. "It's different," he said. "Hard?" "Yes." "Good." He nodded once. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he said something I did not anticipate. I didn't realise how many people depend on things being done right. It wasn't a complaint. It was recognition. For a long time, he continued carefully, I thought money was the result. I didn't understand it's the byproduct. I studied him closely. There it was, the beginning of comprehension. "I embarrassed you," he added quietly. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't look at the ground. He simply stated it. "Yes," I said, "I thought you were showing off." "I was showing love." He swallowed. "I know. There are apologies that are loud and emotional, and there are apologies that are steady and earned. This was the second kind. "I don't need the car," he said after a moment. "I needed the lesson." Those words did something inside me that anger never could. For the first time in months, I saw my son again. Not the image, not the ego, not the performance, just him. But maturity is not proven in a single conversation. It is proven in consistency. So I didn't hug him. I didn't tell him I was proud. I simply said, "Keep going." And I left. Over the next 6 months, he did exactly that. No complaints, no requests. He began volunteering for process improvement meetings, suggested cost-saving adjustments that were practical, not flashy, took responsibility when mistakes happened, even those made by others under his watch. Something else changed too. He stopped posting online, the photographs disappeared, the circle of admirers thinned, real friends remained, and then, one evening, he came to my house, not to ask for anything, just to sit. We had dinner quietly. Halfway through, he looked at me and said, "I didn't understand respect until I had to earn it." I nodded. That's the only kind that lasts. He exhaled slowly. "I don't want to inherit your success," he said. "I want to deserve it." That sentence, more than any apology, told me the lesson had landed. But there was one final step, one that would either cement his transformation or expose that it had only been temporary humility. Because rebuilding trust is not about forgiveness, it's about responsibility returned, and I had a decision prepared that would test everything he claimed to have learned. By the time a full year had passed since that disastrous dinner, my son was no longer the same young man who had stepped out of that sports car like the world owed him applause. He walked differently now, not slower but steadier. Confidence built on validation is loud. Confidence built on effort is quiet. I had watched him closely, not as a suspicious father, but as a cautious one. Transformation is easy to perform for a few months. True character reveals itself in repetition. He showed up, he worked, he listened more than he spoke, and then an opportunity arrived. One of our smaller regional branches had been underperforming for years. Nothing catastrophic, but stagnant. Poor morale, inefficient processes, high staff turnover. It required leadership, not glamorous leadership, but steady correction. I called him into my office. He entered without swagger this time. He closed the door gently and waited. No assumptions. "I have something to discuss with you," I began. He nodded. "There is a regional operations unit 3 hours from here. It needs restructuring." He didn't interrupt. "It's not a promotion," I continued. "It's a responsibility." He absorbed that. "You would oversee 23 employees, most of them older than you, many of them skeptical of management." Silence. "It will not increase your salary dramatically. And if you fail, it will be visible." Finally he spoke. "Why me?" I held his gaze. "Because I want to see whether you lead the way you once showed off." That landed. He didn't rush to accept. He didn't look intimidated either. He asked the only question that mattered. "What does success look like?" Not, "What do I gain?" Not, "Will this make me look good?" What does success look like? "Stability," I answered. "Retention. Accountability. No shortcuts." He nodded once. "I'll do it." No drama, no grand speeches, just commitment. He moved within 2 weeks. Small apartment, no luxury, long hours. The first month was rough. Resistance from staff, supply chain hiccups, a scheduling mistake that cost us money. He called me once during that time, not to complain, to ask for advice. What did you do when people didn't trust you? He asked. I didn't demand trust, I replied. I earned reliability. There was a long pause. I understand. After that, the calls became less frequent. Reports, however, became more interesting. Turnover decreased. Absenteeism dropped. He implemented weekly check-ins with employees, not formal evaluations, but conversations. He asked for feedback and, more importantly, acted on it. 6 months later, the branch posted its first significant profit increase in 4 years. Not explosive, but honest. I drove there without telling him. When I walked into the building, I didn't see him in an office. I saw him on the floor, sleeves rolled up, helping reorganise incoming inventory because 2 staff members had called in sick. No audience, no performance, just work. One of the older employees approached me quietly. You his father? He asked. Yes. He nodded toward my son. He's fair, doesn't hide in the office, that matters. I thanked him. When my son finally noticed me standing there, he looked surprised, but not anxious. We stepped into a small conference room. How's it going? I asked. Tiring, he admitted, but good. Why? He thought for a moment. Because when things improve, I know exactly what it took. That was the sentence. That was the difference. That evening I invited him to dinner, just the 2 of us. Halfway through the meal, I slid a folder across the table. He looked at it, confused. Open it. Inside were documents transferring a minority ownership stake in that regional branch, performance-based equity, not a gift, earned. He stared at the papers for a long time. You're giving me this? No, I said calmly. You built it. His eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time since he was a boy, I saw emotion he didn't try to hide. I don't want what I didn't earn, he said quietly. That's why you're ready. He exhaled slowly, almost laughing at the irony. A year ago, he said, I thought a car proved something. And now? Now I know it only proved I hadn't built anything yet. Here it was. The lesson complete. Here's the truth I learned through all of this. Generosity without boundaries creates entitlement. Correction without love creates resentment. But love with accountability, that builds men. I could have left him humiliated. I could have cut him off entirely. I could have tried to control him. Instead, I chose something harder. I stepped back. I let him fall, but not collapse. And in doing so, I discovered something that surprised both of us. The $300,000 car was never the real gift. Taking it back was, because what I did next didn't shock him, it rebuilt him. And that, in the end, is worth far more than any machine I could ever buy.